Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 138 of Analyzing Evil, featuring Simon Phoenix and Dr. Raymond Cocteau from Demolition Man. A glorious example of early 90s futuristic aesthetic, humor, and storytelling, Demolition Man gives us two villains of note, one a chaotic madman, and the other an idealistic manipulator. And the contrast between the two makes for an interesting ride from start to finish. In this video, we'll be taking a look at both of them, running through this bizarre timeline to better understand the motives and actions of this unlikely duo. But before we get started, let's first talk about our sponsor for this video, Babbel. Babbel is one of the top language learning apps in the world. They offer a wide variety of comprehensive lessons that help you reach your language goals, and they offer perhaps the most crucial tool when it comes to achieving fluency: real-life conversations with native speakers. This is one of the greatest perks that comes with using Babbel, and it's easy to get started with daily lessons that will have you speaking a new language in only 3 weeks. Babbel offers a ton of languages to choose from, as well as several different subscription packages, like their lifetime subscription. So far, I've enjoyed improving my fluency in Spanish and French, but my partner is dead set on touring Italy in the future. And with Babbel, it's easy to get started on a new language that interests you.
Fare canottaggio.
Fare canottaggio.
Fare canottaggio. Sciare.
Sciare. Summer is here, and it's time to set off on that next adventure. And with Babbel at your fingertips, you can ensure that anywhere you'll go, you'll fit right in with the locals. So step up your travel game right now with Babbel by clicking the link down below, where you can get up to 60% off of your subscription. Again, that's up to 60% off of your subscription to Babbel by clicking the link down below. Thank you, Babbel, for sponsoring this video. Now, without further ado, let's begin. In our first encounter with Simon, and in every single one afterwards, we're given everything that defines his character all at once: sadism, cruelty, and a snide, witty sense of humor. There's a certain amount of complexity to be found in most villains, but there are times when characters are fairly one-dimensional, and Simon is one of those characters. That's not really a bad thing. In fact, when done right, like in this case, these characters are fun to watch and easy to loathe. Similarly, while we could speculate on Simon's origins, an origin that I'm sure is similar to many criminals like him, it would honestly be detrimental to his character rather than beneficial. Now that might seem strange, considering that's what I typically do: break down and unmask the reasons why a person is evil or why they're doing evil things. But do we really need to know why Simon Phoenix does what he does beyond his primal desires? I don't think so. And rather than examining what may have drove this man into becoming the monster we see on screen, it's better to take what he is at face value. Simon is essentially the living embodiment of hedonistic chaos and criminal anarchy, and his motives for taking all the murderous actions he takes don't really go too far beyond pleasure for the sake of pleasure. And Simon finds his in creating mayhem, destruction, and death everywhere that he goes. We do see that he has a certain amount of ambition to rule over this futuristic daycare of a world, but that ambition only amounts to him being at the top of the pecking order, so he might be able to enact any sick fantasy that he has on the populace with impunity. He's a maniac in the purest sense of the word, and while the complexity in that designation is limited, its simplicity is terrifying in its own right. A man with no discernible motive beyond his desire for violence, and no real personality beyond that. Simon is like a child, and the whole world is his playground. And while a man with an intricate plan can typically cause much more damage than one without one, or in Simon's case, one with spur-of-the-moment plans, enacted brazenly and without regard for any life, it's still a terrifying prospect to imagine someone with a complete and total lack of empathy, a person whose only desire is to satisfy their own desires, by running amok amongst us. Now, Simon might be the trigger-happy madman in this film, but he's accompanied by another villain that's definitely got a plan, and who has a greater degree of complexity to him: Dr. Raymond Cocteau. A man who assisted in the creation of the cryo-prison system, Dr. Cocteau is hailed as the benevolent creator of San Angeles, the man who guided the world out of ruin following a massive earthquake that ravaged the area in 2010. Likely already making strides towards unleashing his perfection on society prior to this earthquake, Dr. Cocteau was given the opportunity to offer his region the healing it needed, which they seem to have readily accepted. as the people of this region at the time, like Dr. Cocteau, experienced the chaos of life before the earthquake, living through the urban wars of the late 20th century that we saw John Spartan fighting in at the beginning of the film, which according to Dr. Cocteau, continued long after John was frozen, forcing the people to hide in their homes due to the lawlessness of their streets. And out of a shared fear and a desire for a brighter future for humanity, Dr. Cocteau began implementing strict laws and regulations that would seek to eliminate war, crime, ill health, poor mental health, and uncivilized culture, bringing Southern California out of the Dark Ages and into a prismatic future. The cryo prisons had already helped Dr. Cocteau in achieving this goal, but as we learned from John Spartan during a conversation with Dr. Cocteau, the cryo prison system is far from being the humane source of rehabilitation that the people have been led to believe, as not only are you conscious during the entire sentence, but once you've been deemed a non-threat to society, you're thrust into a world where all your loved ones and everything you once held dear has long since vanished. And as John states, for most, if not all people, a death sentence would have been preferable to an existence like this. But alongside this not-so-benevolent form of punishment, we see that Dr. Cocteau has drastically reformed society. Guns were outlawed in their entirety to prevent violence. Alcohol, tobacco, salt, chocolate, coffee, and presumably everything else you could possibly consume that negatively impacts your health in one way or another was outlawed. Language was altered to ensure that no negativity was present in any form, and swearing, along with everything else, was monitored by cameras and microphones, finding anyone who dared to utter an obscenity in an effort to prevent it. And songs and other forms of entertainment were reduced to renderings of old commercials to ensure that individuality and any chance of harmful media developing were eliminated. Even sexual encounters were made taboo by relegating them to virtual reality experiences, eradicating all disease that's associated with intimate physical contact. And of course, microchips were implanted into the hands of every citizen to better monitor their activities and drastically reduce any chance that people would break any of these new laws. Now, the world Dr. Cocteau shaped isn't necessarily evil, as it's probably been quite beneficial to the overall health of society. But then again, it is evil when you consider that all personal freedoms have been curtailed in favor of the greater good. This is a conundrum that has plagued humanity for centuries, if not millennia, if more laws are the answer or less. And there are virtues to be found in either school of thought. However, I think most people would agree that a balance, as John Spartan suggests at the end of the film, is far more agreeable than forcing, or perhaps in the case of freedom, not forcing things onto people. Now, to be fair, it doesn't appear that Dr. Cocteau forced this way of life onto the people he rules over, as the very nature of a pacifistic world makes that nearly impossible. And it seems that over time, the majority of people in San Angeles mutually agreed that this was the best way to order their society. However, what isn't fair at all is the ostracization of people who refuse to conform to this way of life, and even more so, Dr. Cocteau's desire to use Simon Phoenix to eliminate Edgar Friendly and his fellow rebels, the last bastion of resistance against the perfect world envisioned by Dr. Cocteau, a world that's got the beauty of an ant colony and the perfection of a flawless pearl. Safety above all is what Dr. Cocteau peddles to his board of directors. For this reason, Dr. Cocteau looses Simon Phoenix and a gang of his cronies back into the world, and in the process, the lives of dozens of his citizens, as well as scraps, are taken. Aside from the elimination of Edgar Friendly, an unexpected side effect of Simon's rampage blessed Dr. Cocteau's efforts to cleanse the world, the fear that Simon renewed in the populace. With a touch of that same fear that gave Dr. Cocteau his mandate to change the world, he's now finally able to totally eliminate any opposition to the creation of his perfect world. Though he never says just how he'll do so, I think it's reasonable to assume that with the very real threat of a loosed maniac right before their eyes, the populace would have no problem with Dr. Cocteau euthanizing undesirables rather than attempting to rehabilitate them, and the cryoprison system would inevitably be changed to the injection room, and the sewers would probably be filled with gas. And this is the problem with people who enact their vision onto the world. It's their vision, their own selfish desire to see the world ordered in the way they see fit, without much thought given to how others might feel about the matter. And even when those intentions start out as benevolent, as they had when Dr. Cocteau first started this journey, in order to really take care of the opposition to your schemes, you must take drastic and violent action. Thankfully, both Dr. Cocteau and Simon Phoenix received their just desserts at the pinnacle of this film, and the world in this alternate future seems like it might have a chance at righting the wrongs of both of these villains. And at this end, what is there to say about this dynamic duo? Well, They represent opposing villainous archetypes: the maniac criminal, destroying the world around him for his own pleasure, and the academic would-be do-gooder, shaping the world as he sees fit, no matter how anyone might feel about it. Though this might be the case, they're really two sides of one very specific coin, the one that dictates how men with power who don't want to get their hands dirty use those who will. These characters are a prime example of a dynamic that has been present throughout our history, and one that will continue to be present so long as there are men and women with vision who will do whatever it takes to ensure that their dreams are realized. Dr. Cocteau is the sterling paragon of the future, the man who serves as the herald for health, wealth, and prosperity, and Simon Phoenix is the bloody cudgel that he uses to make that dream a reality. As I mentioned earlier, compromise is the name of the game, as we learn at the end of this film. Alternatives instead of eradication, mutually agreed upon solutions rather than top-down ultimatums, and acceptance rather than ostracization. Simon Phoenix and Dr. Cocteau are radical representations of some of the worst forms a human being can take, and there have been many throughout our own history who likely served as inspiration for these two. And while they may be very different, both can find plenty in common with the other as they walk side by side down the path of evil. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on Simon and Dr. Cocteau? Did I miss anything? Let me know down below, and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured while you're at it. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. A big thank you to all of my subscribers, to my patrons, and anyone who's decided to honor me with a super thank, and a most vile thank you to those whose names you're seeing on screen now. Join the channel's Discord server and subreddit to interact with myself and the community, and follow me on the social media platforms listed below to keep up with the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.